the American president is now openly questioning Canada's sovereignty. That has been jarring. Powers like Iran, Russia, and China have been allowed to use global rules and institutions when it suits them. However, ladies and gentlemen, friends if I may, this state of affairs ominously mirrors the rivalries of the pre-World War I period, and history tells us where that led. God help us as we enter a combination of advanced weaponry and computer power. This country, India, is one of the few that is experiencing both strong leadership and a positive forward direction. Frankly, I have been heartbroken to watch the steady deterioration of this relationship under my successor. And what better topic for me to address today than India's role in the emerging new world order. But before I discuss the role of India in the new world order, allow me to take a few minutes to ask, what is this new world order exactly? For example, you will often heard it said that the world is moving from a US-led unipolar order to a multipolar order. I do not believe that is correct. I believe that it is correct only in part. The multipolar part may be true, but the order part is not. The world is not moving from one order to another. The world is moving from order to disorder. It is moving from a global, rules-based and institution-based arrangement to something much more akin to the survival of the fittest and the triumph of the strongest. It is moving away from the idea that interaction between countries through markets and trade can be and should be mutually beneficial. It is also moving away from the idea that freedom and democracy and the values that attach to them are aspirational and beneficial for everyone. In short, it is not just a shift away from rules and institutions. It is a shift away from a mindset to a new mindset. It is a shift away from a mindset of mutual benefit to a mindset of zero sum. This has been happening progressively over the past couple of decades. Powers like Iran, Russia, and China and others have been allowed to use global rules and institutions when it suits them, while also simultaneously using raw power to intimidate or coerce others, especially in their own neighborhoods. In effect, they have been increasingly building old-fashioned spheres of influence. The United States, with its Western allies, has been increasingly unable to rein in these developments. But now, they are increasingly unwilling to do so. Indeed, under President Trump, the United States is now turning quite explicitly to its own version of this approach. I think of the U.S. position that Ukraine's sovereignty can only be defended if it surrenders its mineral wealth to the United States. Obviously, I'm also referring to the President's musing that Canada and Greenland should be acquired by the United States. As a Canadian, I must say that I find this a shocking development. My country has long been the deepest and most balanced economic and security partner of the United States, of any, frankly, the most integrated economic and security partner of any the United States has anywhere in the world. Yet, the American president is now openly questioning Canada's sovereignty. That has been jarring for every element of Canadian public opinion. Now, I don't make this observation about America's evolution entirely out of censure. This development is somewhat understandable. After all, the rules-based order has increasingly been used as a constraint on the United States alone. It has certainly not been a constraint on its geopolitical rivals, but it has often not been a constraint on America's own allies either. because the truth is that they have too often been willing to free ride on American economic access and security guarantees, while at the same time charting international courses without any reference to their relationship to the United States. In any case, what I'm seeing in the world is that given this new multipolar disorder, and particularly given the growing rivalry between the United States and China, many smaller and weaker countries are attempting to protect themselves by hedging between these powers. However, that need not be the case for this country, India. Fortunately for India, this rising nation should be more than able to cope with this new state of affairs. Now, it's true, as I understand it, that India would have preferred a different course. India would have preferred a revamp of global rules and multilateral institutions to recognize its importance. Sadly, those such global rules and multilateral institutions now seem increasingly doomed to fall by the wayside. However, I'll come back to that. But in any case, the decline of global rules and multilateral institutions does not mean that India need be forced into mere hedging strategies, because India is itself emerging as an important global power. And India can be that kind of power both because it is big enough and because it possesses attributes that make it an attractive partner for other major powers in the world. First, let's talk about size. India is on track to become the largest country in the world by population, if it has not already done so. Your economy, by any measure, is no less now than the fifth largest in the world, and it is growing more robustly than any other country in that top category. Combine this with your huge landmass and your unique cultural force, and India is unquestionably on track to become a new global power in its own right. Now, I do not say this to flatter, because India does have some significant challenges. Your economic structures, particularly in agriculture, could hold this country back. Also, India's military might does not yet match its economic strength. And military strength in this new dog-eat-dog world is really going to matter. And your influence, even in your own neighborhood, is today challenged, both by China on the one hand and by forces in the Islamic world on the other. But as I've said, India has attributes that make it a desirable partner rather than a target for other world powers. For example, you've long had a productive alliance with Russia. It's something that, as a longtime opponent of Vladimir Putin, I admit only grudgingly, but it is real. India's democratic ethos also makes you a compatible force with the European Union and, of course, even more importantly, with the United States, particularly as you both cannot ignore the nature of China and its long-term threats. India's status as an emerging post-colonial nation also allows you to build linkages with many others in the global south, regardless of their systems of governance. I think, for example, of the Gulf, of Africa, Brazil, many others. So despite this new emerging multipolar global disorder, India is one country that should grow in influence and that should continue to prosper. However, ladies and gentlemen, friends, if I may, we should be under no illusion that the world I'm talking about, the world that is emerging, is not a desirable state of affairs for humanity. In fact, this state of affairs ominously mirrors the rivalries of the pre-World War I period, and history tells us where that led. God help us as we enter a new such period with its combination of advanced weaponry and computer power. So for this reason, I do hope that India will not totally succumb to hard power, sphere of influence global politics, but that you will, on some level, also continue to champion the soft power values of the free and democratic civilization of which you are a member. Look at the challenges that confront us. The need for continued global growth and prosperity, energy and climate, pandemics and human health, sustainable development goals, and of course, peace and security. I put it to you that none of these things will do well over time if the world is left only with spheres of influence and deals between strongmen. On all those matters, humanity will need an enlightened voice from an India that is both free and democratic and imbued with an understanding of the needs of the people of the global South. In fact, no one will be better positioned, no country will be better positioned to be that civilized voice for broader human interests than India. The West today is unable to do so. It has been through a period of profoundly weak leadership. It has seen Western powers gravitate between nihilistic self-censure and haughty moral lecturing. In that regard, the strongman approach of Trump, with all its downsides, is probably a necessary corrective. Let's hope, however, that it is a short-term one, because America is still the world's preeminent power by multiple measures, and the world needs America to be strong, yes, but also to be idealistic. In the meantime, however, this country, India, is one of the few that is experiencing both strong leadership and a positive forward direction. One of the very few. I go around the world, this country is exceptional in that regard right now. The India I visit regularly is buzzing with optimism and ambition. India is modernizing at home and moving forward on a myriad of relationships abroad, and it is doing many useful things. I think, for example, of India's G20 presidency, where your country spoke not merely for itself, but for an entire cohort of nations and their concerns from Latin America to Africa and elsewhere. I still believe that India's rise as a free and democratic power, while distinct from the West, has the potential to lead to an Asian century, not an Asian century in the communist Chinese style of coercion and disruption, but an Asian century of benevolent cooperation and collaboration. I've spoken before of India's great potential, not merely as a mere echo of Western liberalism, but as a free and democratic society shaped by its own history, culture, and nationalism. That, I believe, is one of humanity's great hopes for light in what are these darkening times. It is, in fact, the very nature of India that allows for forums like this, truly global ones, of competing ideas and thoughtful exchange. Now, I do want to address one other question and one other set of issues, and that is the elephant in the room. And this is not an Asian elephant or an African elephant. This is a Canadian elephant. I'd also hope that my own country, Canada, will reestablish benevolent and productive relations with yours. As Prime Minister, I put a lot of effort into revitalizing our relationship. During the administrations of both the late, great Manmohan Singh and, needless to say, the dynamic Narendra Modi. There are so many ways in which Canada and India are both compatible and complementary. Both the prime ministers that I dealt with understood that. And frankly, I have been heartbroken to watch the steady deterioration of this relationship under my successor. I don't think I entirely understand why that is, and I am certainly in no position to evaluate the accusations that have been made. Suffice it to say this, that when I was in office, my government understood, and we understood without any nuance, that the vast majority of Canadians generally, and the vast majority of Indo-Canadians specifically, do not align themselves with people who would wish to see the division of India, this great country. Let me leave it at that, except to add that now, with my own country, Canada, facing for the first time in well over 100 years a hostile United States, we on our side need to rebuild the Canada-India relationship as never before. In any case, as you here in India navigate this new world, as you build on your own strengths and deftly create linkages both west and east and north and south, I hope you will not forget about us in Canada, nor will you forget that a truly great world power strives to create peace and prosperity for all of humanity. Thank you.